Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. On May 9th, King Arthur Legion 9 will release, and I know many of you will be interested in builds for the character you can play as. This series will review the mechanics and provide a build for each of your party members. There are chapters below, so you can skip back and forth between the sections that interest you the most. If there's any content you want to see, be sure to let me know down in the comments. First up, we'll review the main character, Gaius Julius Mentos. He's a Tribunus, which, for those of you who played Knight's Tale, is essentially the same as a vanguard. This means he wields double daggers and focuses on dishing out as much damage as possible. His morality will always be listed as neutral on the character sheet, but obviously you can look at the morality scale to see where you land. He has two traits, and the first one is Agile, which gives him one additional movement action point. Each tile of movement requires a green action point, so the more you move, the less actions you are able to take. Movement action points are yellow and can only be used for movement. Having more of these is an effective way to remain mobile while also not limiting how many attacks you can perform. This is perfect for Gaius. Skilled gives him one additional skill point every 5 levels. Again, this is fantastic and helps him rapidly gain crucial mechanics. When you assign a character to one of the towers in your home base, they'll get a title, which provides a small buff. There are two that I think work very well for Gaius. The one I use for him is Master Blacksmith, which provides one additional armor every 5 levels. While he wears heavy armor, Gaius is a little squishy, and I found the extra protection to be useful. The other option is War Council, which provides a +1 bonus to movement AP. Obviously, that's great for Gaius, but I gave it to the tank because it's absolutely critical that he gets to the best spot possible. We'll talk more about that in the next mechanics video. Alright, now let's get into the actual skills. The top section is active skills that you manually use, while the second section is passive skills that are always activated. The skill in the middle is your ultimate ability unlocked at level 10. Some skills also have upgrades. 2 upgrades will be available right from the start, while 1 upgrade won't be unlocked until level 8, and the other one won't be available until level 12. I am not sure what the max level is for Legion 9, but after completing the main story, I reached level 18. Let's start at the bottom. You automatically get Barbed Blade, which causes all your attacks to make enemies bleed. This is fantastic because bleeding enemies take 15% of your weapon damage at the beginning of their turn and every time they take an action. Unlike Knight's Tale, there are a ton of enemies in Legion 9 that are susceptible to bleeding, so this is great for your build. Extra bleeding adds another 50% damage to your bleeding effects. No question, this is a must-have pickup. After that is Strength, which gives you another 10% weapon damage. Obviously, for a damage-focused build, this is something you'll want. Motivate provides your allies an extra 10% weapon damage on their next attack for every unit you kill. I would say this is a late-game pickup because at first, you'll want to focus on maximizing Gaius. When that is done, he can kill 3 enemies in one turn, and this will be a very nice pickup to have. Armorer removes the action point penalty you take for using heavy armor. Wearing heavy armor isn't an option for this class, and you need all the action points you can get, so this is definitely important to take. Quick-footed makes you immune to attacks of opportunity. It's critical that Gaius navigate behind enemies for backstabs, and this lets him do it with no penalty. This passive is the single most important upgrade on the entire sheet, and it should be the first one you take. The other 3 passives are ones that also come with upgrades. All Resistance provides a 30% bonus to mental debuff resist and physical debuff resist. My playstyle focused heavily on the tank absorbing the vast majority of heat and crowd control effects, while Gaius runs around the outskirts picking off easy targets. Consequently, I skipped this option, and even on hard, there was only 1 or 2 fights where I wished I had it. Very hard and brutal might necessitate this option. Evasive reduces the damage you take from ranged attacks, which is nice because while Gaius will be adept at avoiding being surrounded, ranged enemies are hard to avoid. Damage over time resistance reduces the turn duration for bleeding, burning, and poison effects by 1 turn. No, one of your party members is very effective at removing negative status effects, so you don't need this. Ruthlessness provides a small amount of vitality for each kill, and that absolutely makes you more tanky, so it's not a bad option. Extra Vitality provides an amount of health that scales with your level. It's a large boost considering how much base vitality you have, so again, if you are playing on an ultra hard difficulty, it's something to consider. Juggernaut gives you 3% extra damage for each tile of movement until the end of your turn. Definitely a must-have, both for its upgrades and also because you'll need to move constantly, so this results in big damage bonuses. Scout gives you a +1 increase to perception, which is used to discover traps during combat and hidden loot while exploring environments. Traps are not prominent until you get to the end game, and while hidden loot does come up consistently, I wouldn't call the chest plentiful. What's more important is the +1 bonus you get to movement action points, which I've already mentioned are fantastic for Gaius. Pick this up. On the Run reduces the AP cost for non-basic skills by 1 point for every 2 tiles you travel during your turn. Again, you will be on the run quite a bit, so this is fantastic. Scout is available twice as an upgrade, and honestly, I recommend you get both of them. Recon provides you with 2 movement points for the first turn of an encounter. This is fantastic because oftentimes you will start far away from the enemies you want to eliminate. Pick this up. Backstab gives you 15% additional weapon damage when stabbing enemies in the back. Backstabs already deal an additional 30% weapon damage, so guys should be performing them whenever possible, and this is a great passive to get. Finisher tacks on an additional 5% weapon damage. This is cool, but it's more of a mid to late game pickup as there are a lot of other great options. Hunter reduces the AP cost of skills by 1 when there is only 1 enemy present. I skip this because the vast majority of the time you'll be dealing with more than 1 enemy, and if there's only 1 foe left, you should be able to shred them easily. Focus Strike gives you a +1 armor piercing bonus when backstabbing. Armor piercing allows your attacks to ignore a portion of an enemy's armor, which allows more damage to hit their vitality. This scales with your level, and I would say by around level 10, it's definitely worth considering. Weak Spots gives you 15% extra weapon damage against units affected by bleeding or poison. This is a must-have upgrade that you should be able to trigger all the time. Alright, that's all the passives, so now let's get into the active skills. You automatically gain Strike, which lets you deal 75% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy twice for 3 action points. None of your allies attack twice with Strike, and it costs more action points for some of them, so this really lets you pump out a lot of damage. Sinister Blow increases the weapon damage by 15%, which is obviously a no-brainer. Vulnerability causes struck enemies to become vulnerable for 1 turn, which increases the damage they take by 20%. This is worth it to help ensure the second time you attack an enemy, they stay down. Mark Target causes an enemy to take 10% additional damage from your allies. I skip this because most of the time, Gaius is taking enemies on his own. Relentless Strikes gives you a 10% increase to weapon damage against bleeding enemies. Definitely a must-have upgrade. Jumping Attack allows you to jump 2 to 5 cells and deal 150% weapon damage for 4 action points. Absolutely, this is a great ability that makes Gaius even more mobile. The skill can trigger backstab, so use it from behind when possible. Long Rush increases the max range by 1 tile, which is a no-brainer. Knockback causes the attack to also push enemies back 1 tile. I skip this because usually I want the enemy to remain right beside Gaius for follow-up attacks. Devastating Impact adds a resounding 25% weapon damage to the attack, which is obviously a must-have pickup. Finally, Unfazed gives you 2 action points if the attack kills the target, which should be triggered all the time. Definitely pick that up. Invocation of Mars increases your weapon damage by 25% for 1 turn at the cost of 1 paltry action point. This is absolutely a skill you will want to have. Frequent Offerings reduces the cooldown by 1 turn. This is fantastic because the base cooldown is 4 turns and the skill only lasts for 1, so you are forced to go 3 turns without it. I would say this is more of a mid-game pickup, but it's definitely nice to have. Absolute Destruction increases your armor breaking by 20% while this is activated. Armor breaking significantly increases the rate at which you destroy enemies' armor while attacking, and it's essential for some of the well-armored bosses. Another mid-game pickup, but definitely nice. Assurance of Victory increases the damage bonus by 10%, and this is another no-brainer. Finally, Deep Contemplation increases the duration by 1 turn, and again, you will absolutely want to have this. Execution allows you to instantly kill enemies who are under 40% vitality. This even works against bosses, but the catch is that an enemy's physical debuff resist ranking will reduce the vitality threshold. Your party members have ways to lower an enemy's PDR. This skill is fantastic and lets you use less AP to eliminate targets who are on the brink. Don't forget that Juggernaut has an upgrade that lowers the AP cost for non-basic skills, so it could potentially cost only 1 AP to execute an enemy as opposed to 3 or even 6 AP to finish them off with Strike. Carnage reduces the cooldown on this ability, which starts at 5, so lowering it by 1 is definitely useful. Bloodbath grants a 100% increase to bleeding damage for 2 turns. Execute an enemy, strike a boss once to make them bleed, and then continue the carnage in other areas. Great stuff. Merciless causes all enemies within 2 tiles of the execution to become weakened for 1 turn, which reduces their damage by 33%. I skipped this because, again, I use Gaius on the outskirts to pick off enemies who are separate from the main group. Tormentor increases the vitality threshold by 10%, and no doubt you want this. Terror causes all enemies within 2 tiles to have 2 less action points at the start of their next turn. An enemy's mental debuff resist ranking will reduce the amount of action points lost. By itself, I am not a fan of this ability, but it has a really nice upgrade. Jump Scare reduces the AP cost by 1, which will bring it down to 2 and make this ability easier to consistently use. Murderlust reduces the cooldown by 1, which will bring it to 2 turns. Very nice. Shivers causes the skill to also weaken enemies for 1 turn, which again reduces their damage by 33%. Walking into the largest group of enemies and causing all their damage to plummet is a big deal and definitely worth considering. It's also great if Gaius happens to be on an island with multiple enemies who are not distracted by your tank. Personally, I skipped this skill because I wanted Gaius wholly focused on dealing damage, but it is nice. Monstrous Presence increases the range by 1 tile, which is obviously great if you decide to use this skill. Palisades creates 2 palisades for 3 turns that count as full cover and have half of Gaius's vitality. This can be fantastic if you want shielding from nasty archers or mages. It can also block choke points, making it harder for melee characters to close the distance. I skipped this skill and used other options to control the battlefield, but it definitely has merit. Fortified Planks increases the vitality Palisades gains from Gaius by 15%. This is a good pickup, and if you decide to use this ability heavily, it probably also makes sense to get the passes, which increase Gaius's base vitality as well. Barbed Edges allow the Palisades to deal 20% of your weapon damage against melee attackers. I would say this isn't worth it because most melee attackers will probably just walk around your Palisades unless you position them at a choke point, which oftentimes will not be an option. Dedicated Worker increases the number of Palisades that can be created by 1, and obviously this is a great option. Finally, Master Right reduces the Palisades cost by 1, bringing the total cost to 1 action point, and yeah, that's definitely fantastic. The last skill is Gaius's ultimate ability, Hack and Slash. This consumes all of his action points, and then for each point consumed, he'll dish out attacks that steadily increase the damage. The attack starts at 40%, and then each subsequent attack increases the damage by 15%. The really cool thing about this is that the soul cost is only 20. The max amount of souls you can have is 100, so you can use this pretty much whenever you want. For maximum effect, keep a haste potion on Gaius so he can consume double the AP. Alright, now you know all of his mechanics, so let's actually go through a build. As you can tell by now, there are a few different ways to set up Gaius, so this isn't really the end-all be-all. But this setup did make it quite painless for me to finish the game on hard. There are 32 points up at the top, but I did give him a few skill tomes, so you might have less points by level 16. Alright, first up, I would take quick footed so that you'll be immune to opportunity attacks. It's really going to help you to be mobile around the battlefield. And on that same note, I recommend you take jumping attack, which is going to allow you to reach faraway enemies, and it's going to do more damage than what you'll be able to with Strike. Next up, I like taking Armorer because it's going to give you back the 1 action point you lose for using heavy armor. And then I also want to take Sinister Blows to make your strikes even more powerful. Those are all the action points you'll have the first time you level up. When you first level up, you're going to be at level 6, and it's going to give you 7 action points total. So from here on out, you're going to have to do things one by one as you level up throughout the game. The next upgrade I would take is strength to give you some more weapon damage. Then we're going to take extra bleeding to ensure you get more weapon damage for your bleeding effects. Then we're going to take juggernaut because again we're going to have to move constantly, so this is going to result in nice damage bonuses for us. On your next level up you'll be level 10, which means you're going to have 3 action points due to his skill trait. So I would actually take both of the scout upgrades to give you some additional movement action points. And then I would also take vulnerability because it's going to allow you to carve up enemies even easier. For your next upgrade, I will go ahead and take backstab because again, with all this extra movement action points, it should make it very, very easy to navigate to the back of enemies and consistently trigger this upgrade. And then on your next level up, you're going to want to go ahead and take weak spots. You, of course, are able to cause enemies to bleed on a very regular basis. And then one of your party members is able to poison enemies on a very regular basis. And this party member can attack multiple enemies in one turn. So you can poison, I think, up to around 7 enemies in one turn if you have enough action points. So it makes it really, really easy to ensure this is always triggered for Gaius. And then in addition to this, I would also take recon. So you have an extra 2 movement action points on the first turn of the encounter. Again, during the first turn, a lot of times the enemies are far away, so it's really, really nice being able to get to them easier. Next, I would take execution. You can actually make the case that this should have been taken earlier, but I just felt like some of the core aspects of the build needed to be put in place first before we got this, but it's definitely going to help you with your action point economy. Speaking of things that we've been waiting on, I also would recommend on your next level up, you take Invocation of Mars, which is going to give you a 25% boost to weapon damage for 1 turn. It costs 1 AP. Very, very nice. Again, you can make the case you could take it earlier, but I felt like some of these other core things were more important. On your next level up, you're going to be level 15, which means you're going to have 3 action points to spend instead of just 2. So I would recommend you take Relentless Strikes, so you have more damage against bleeding enemies. Long Rush, so that your jumping attacks range is increased. And then I would also recommend you take Absolute Destruction to help you break armor when you have the damage increase for Invocation of Mars. Definitely a really, really nice combo. On your next level up, I recommend you take Devastating Impacts to make your jumping attack even more powerful. And then I'd also recommend you take Focus Strike, which is going to give you +3 armor piercing by this time since you'll be past level 15. Again, that's really nice and going to help you get past the defenses of some of those tougher enemies you'll be facing. On your next level up, I recommend you take Deep Contemplation, which is going to give you 1 additional turn on Invocation of Mars. So that's 2 turns with 25% weapon damage. Very, very nice. And then I would also recommend you take Tormentor, which is going to increase the vitality threshold in order for you to be able to use Execution. Again, it's going to really help with your action point economy. On your next turn, I would recommend you take Frequent Offerings. So this is going to increase the amount of time. It's actually going to lower the cooldown for you to use Invocation of Mars. So now it's going to last for 2 turns, and then the cooldown is going to be 4 turns. So you'll be able to use it more often during combat. And that's all the action points that I can use up at this level. So again, I finished the game at level 18, and I spread out my skill tomes to a couple of other characters. So you could easily have more skill points than me even by this point. There are a few things left off that we would definitely want to get. So we didn't get the cooldown for Execution. We didn't get an additional 100% bleeding damage. We don't have the extra weapon damage for Invocation of Mars. And we didn't get On the Run, which is really, really important. And you can actually make the case that maybe it should be prioritized over one of the things that I've already taken. But this core build definitely will get you through hard, and you'll still have plenty of extra points left over to add some other things or some flavoring that you might want. All right, I figured some of you will probably want to see a combat example. So here we're pretty typical fight. We're facing a ton of undead, and they've even got a couple of summoning totems as well. The only thing I did is pull out my tank, and this is going to be pretty standard fare. Again, we'll talk about this more in the next mechanics video, but you always want the tank rushing out first, taunting a bunch of people, and then that helps to inform how Gaius can safely kind of skirt around and kill all the enemies who aren't directly attacking the tank. So it's the first turn. That means recon is kicked in, giving me a couple more movement action points, and I've got some other mechanics that are doing that as well. And it just helps to ensure that on the first turn, he's able to go wherever he needs to go. The enemy is a ways away from me, but honestly, in many fights, enemies will be much further. And so to get to the best spot for you to start off combat really helps to have those extra movement points. All right, now I'm going to get a little bit closer, and then I could do a jumping attack. But actually, since I have my full list of action points, I'm going to go ahead and trigger Invocation of Mars, because I know I'm going to be able to really make use of it. And then we'll go ahead and do a jumping attack. You see it makes a tremendous difference, that armor breaking that Invocation of Mars gives us. Let us just completely annihilate the armor the creature has. And then we're going to be able to do another strike. And then most likely we'll be able to go ahead and execute the creature. No, it's not quite under 40%. That's fine. Here, we'll go ahead and give it a second. We'll do something simple like use her. Oh, it's not even going to let me do it. Dang it. I moved up too far. I wanted to use our fire strikes to bring it down a little bit more. But here, I can use you. So this guy, in another video, we'll talk more about him. But he is really cool in that he can poison multiple people. So we'll go ahead and use volley. And then I can attack you. And we'll attack you. And we'll attack you, and we'll attack you. And he can just poison all those different enemies. Now, in this particular case, they're all undead, so it's not allowing me to poison them. But in other situations, it's definitely nice. But regardless, we should now, we can now use execution. And bam. And if we wanted to, we could pick up the 4 souls, but we actually have full souls bar already. All right, so now we're back to Gaius again. He's got a couple of close by enemies, and he's got 4 movement points. So again, he can easily navigate behind here without using up the action points he would actually use to attack. Then we'll go ahead and do this, and bam, that enemy is taken care of. And then we've got another one here. Again, we don't even have to use our regular action points. Awesome. And then we've got one more here. Awesome. Just taking them out one by one. And then the other cool thing is, when you have moving points left over, you could try to position yourself in the best place where you're not going to be completely at the mercy of other enemies. So I'll bring them down here, and hopefully, in fact, no, definitely I'm gonna bring my tank over here, and he'll be able to take up all of that heat. All right, and now we're back again, and I've got jumping attack again, so we can go ahead and use that right off the bat. Okay, and if I just attack him regularly, I wouldn't quite be able to take him out. So instead, it makes more sense to use my movement action points to navigate to the back. And now I take him out completely with no issue. And then we're going to navigate here. And you know what? I'm not sure if I can use my ultimate ability on an item. Let's see if that's the case. Looks like I can. So you all can go ahead and see that. And just in general, the movement, his damage, just a ton of things make it really, really easy for you to use Gaius and make full use of all his abilities. But he needs to be paired with a competent tank. And this situation makes it clear. Usually, some of these ranged enemies will be able to pelt him and just absolutely decimate him. But with a quality tank who's taunting all these enemies and drawing in a lot of that fire, it makes it much, much safer for him to travel out and about. So that'll be my next video, talking about your Praetorian. But that does it for this video. Hopefully it gives you all some additional information about how best to use Gaius Julius Mento. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts or any recommendations on what you'd like to see changed or improved in the mechanics videos to come. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.